Hello, dear viewers. Fasten your seatbelts, because this is a surreal event buried deep within history, and this is your final call before takeoff. Today, I am taking you on a journey into one of the darkest, most unexplainable, and most question-raising incidents in all of history. A tragedy that took place in 1959 in the Ural Mountains. A terrifying event with documents so strange that even the Soviet archives could not fully contain them. Mysterious and unbelievable deaths that cannot be explained by wild animal attacks, avalanche danger, or freezing temperatures. A tent cut open from the inside, hikers running half-naked into a storm for reasons unknown, fractures on their bodies, burn marks, and even traces of low-level radiation. This story is not just a missing persons case. This story stands before us as an unsolved mystery carved into the cold pages of history. Today, we embark on this journey together. While our flight attendants begin the beverage service, sit back, relax, and listen to your captain.
There are places on Earth where a person feels they do not belong from the very first step. In those places, silence is not peace, but a threat. Whiteness is not always purity. Sometimes it is an endless, bottomless abyss.
This is the most desolate corner of the Ural Mountains, Kolat-Syak, known in the language of the local Mansi people as the Mountain of Death. The date is February 2nd, 1959. In the heart of the Soviet Union, in an era when technology and science were reaching into space, something happened here, in this frozen hell that neither reason nor logic could explain. There were 9 of them, young, strong, experienced, and the bright children of Soviet idealism. Led by Igor Dyatlov, they set out to complete a route classified as Category 3 difficulty. All of them were among the best mountaineers of the Ural Polytechnic Institute. For them, this was not just a sport, but a challenge. Yet none of them knew that this journey would turn into a one-way ticket with no return home.
The plan was actually very simple. They would arrive in the town of Vizhai on February 12th and send a telegram to the club saying, "We made it." But when the day came, no telegram arrived. At first, no one was worried. Delays in the mountains were common. One day passed, then 2, then a week. As the silence grew longer, the family's concern and the fear in their hearts grew like the cold of the Urals.
On February 20, one of the largest search and rescue operations in Soviet history began. The army, militia, volunteer students, helicopters, and aircraft all were mobilized for one single question: where is the Dyatlov group? And on February 26, the answer was found. But this answer was far more terrifying than the question itself. During the flight, the rescue pilot noticed a small dark spot on the mountainside, right in the middle of the whiteness. It was the group's tent, but it was abandoned. When the search team was guided toward the tent and finally reached it, the scene they encountered resembled not a campsite, but a portrait of madness rather than a crime scene. Something they could never have imagined had become reality. The tent was empty, but the belongings, boots, coats, maps, food, and even their money, all were inside. In minus 30 degrees, where could they possibly have gone? They had left behind everything that could keep them alive. Even more disturbing, examinations revealed a chilling detail. The tent had not been cut from the outside, but from the inside. What happened inside that tent that night? What could force 9 experienced mountaineers to slash their way out with a knife and run into the freezing darkness, with no shoes, only socks, or even barefoot, essentially towards certain death? What could be the true cause of a terror so immense that it drove them to flee, even at the cost of freezing to death? The rescue team followed the tracks, trying to shed light on what had happened. 1.5 kilometers downhill, beneath an old cedar tree at the edge of the forest, they found the remnants of a burned-out fire.
The first spark of discovery, the first heartbeat, and beside it, the first two bodies. Yuri Krivonishenko and Yuri Doroshenko.
They encountered something that would never leave their memories for the rest of their lives. The bodies were dressed only in their underwear. There were burn marks on their skin. Their hands were stripped of flesh from desperately gripping the cedar's branches. The branches of the tree were broken up to 5 meters high, as if they had tried to climb the tree to hide from something, or perhaps they were watching something above them. But the real horror had not yet been discovered.
The others, Igor Dyatlov, Zinaida Kolmogorova, and Rustem Slobodin, were found frozen between the tent and the cedar tree, as if they had tried to return to the tent with their last strength. Their faces were turned to the ground. But the remaining 4 mountaineers, it took months to find them. Why had they separated from the others? When the snow melted, they were discovered deep in the valley, and the condition of these 4 turned the case from a simple death by hypothermia into something straight out of a horror film. Lyudmila Dubinina and Semyon Zolotaryov had shattered rib cages. Nikolai Thibault-Brignol had a fatal skull fracture. Forensic expert Boris Vozorodny stated in his report, "These injuries could not have been caused by human strength. This is the type of trauma that could only occur from a high-speed car crash." But the strange thing was, there were no external marks of impact, no animal attacks, bruises, or cuts. It was as if immense pressure had crushed them from the inside, like a tin can. And the details grew even darker. Dubinina's tongue, eyes, and part of her lips were missing. Unexplained radioactive traces were found on their clothing. Their skin had turned a strange shade of orange, and their hair had turned gray. Families were forbidden from opening the coffins at the funerals. The crime scene was hastily closed, and the file was stamped top secret. The official statement by Soviet authorities was one of the most vague and unsatisfying conclusions in history. The cause of death was an unknown, compelling force that the mountaineers could not overcome. Unknown, compelling, a force? What was this force? A simple slab avalanche? Were they victims of a secret military test? Did a spy operation connected to the KGB go wrong? Or was it an ancient curse spoken of in local legends? Or a natural phenomenon that science has yet to identify? Over the past 65 years, more than 75 theories have been proposed. From amateur detectives to scientists, from conspiracy theorists to government officials, everyone sought an answer. Yet the Dyatlov Pass stubbornly kept it secret. In this documentary, we will set the legends aside. We will examine the files, autopsy reports, diaries, and findings of modern science, and we will reconstruct, second by second, what happened that night on Kholat Sakla.
Get ready and put on your coats, because this story will make you shiver to your very bones. In pursuit of the truth, we are heading into the darkness of the Ural Mountains, to Dyatlov Pass.
Now, lean back and let me tell you about this thrilling event in my own words. January 1959, the Soviet Union. Behind the Iron Curtain, life flowed according to strict rules, yet the spirit of adventure pulsed in the veins of its youth. This is Sverdlovsk, nestled at the foothills of the Ural Mountains, known as the heart of industry and science. The Ural Polytechnic Institute. At the time, It was where the brightest minds of the country gathered. Engineers, physicists, perhaps even the architects of the future. But this story is not about their academic achievements. This story is about their passions, their excitement. In those years, for Soviet youth, trekking into nature was more than just a sport. It was an escape, perhaps the only escape. From concrete blocks, from harsh rules, from the dark tones of the city into the wild whiteness of nature.
And every great journey had great leaders. Igor Alexeyevich Dyatlov, only 23 years old. His friends called him Gosha, but in the mountains, he was an unquestioned leader. He was a radio engineering student, intelligent, technically gifted, almost a prodigy. He had even designed his own radio device at the time. Igor was known for his meticulous nature. When he planned a route, it never stayed on paper. He mentally walked through every step, every turn, every possibility. But this plan, this one was different. Their destination was Mount Otorten in the northern Urals, a peak said to mean "do not go there" in the local Mansi language, an ominous summit. This route was classified as Category 3 at the time, the hardest, most dangerous level, attempted only by the most experienced mountaineers.
Rustam Slobodin, quiet, athletic, and the artistic soul who lifted the team's spirits at night with his mandolin. Alexander Kolevatov, a nuclear physics student, methodical and detail-oriented. Yuri Krivonishenko, known to his friends as Krivo, playful, full of life, a talented engineer who had taken part in a classified cleanup after an accident at the Mayak nuclear facility. And Nikolai Thibault Brignoles, of French descent, witty, energetic. They all knew each other. All were students or graduates of UPI, except for one, Semyon Zolotaryov. He was 37 years old, far older than the others, a World War II veteran, a man with mysterious tattoos on his body and dark, unanswered questions in his past. He had joined the team at the last moment, recommended by an instructor. No one truly knew him. Why was he there? Was it simply to upgrade his sports qualification? Or did he have another mission? That question remains a mystery even today.
January 23, 1959, Sverdlovsk train station. The weather is cold, but spirits are high. In their bags, they carry canned meat, sugar, maps, and Igor's famous portable stove. They have their mandolins with them, and most importantly, their diaries. For them, this was not a tragedy waiting to enter the pages of history, but the greatest adventure of their youth. In fact, they were 10. Yuri Yudin, the 10th member of the group. At the very beginning of the journey, when they reached the village of Vizhai, his chronic sciatica flared up. He became unable to walk. As his friends said goodbye to him, Yuri Yudin felt like the unluckiest person in the world. He had to give up the journey he had dreamed of for months. He hugged Ludmila, waved to Zina. He asked Igor, "Should we worry if you're late?" Igor smiled and said, "We'll probably be delayed a few days, don't worry." When Yuri Yudin stepped off that train and headed back home, he had no idea he was actually walking back into life. And he was unaware that his friends were walking toward death. That farewell became the beginning of a lifelong burden, a tormenting question that would follow him for decades. Why was I the one who survived? After Yuri left, the remaining 9 crossed the last boundary of civilization. The lines in their diaries allow us to feel the atmosphere of those days. Zina wrote in her journal, "The weather is wonderful, the snow is sparkling. We are free." Igor noted, "The wind is getting stronger, but the team is solid." They even created a playful, handwritten Evening Otorten newspaper among themselves. Look at the photographs. Look into their eyes. What you see is pure happiness.
hope for the future. There is no fear, no anxiety, because they had no idea what awaited them. Nature? A military experiment? Or something unexplainable, something not of this world? The night of January 31, leading into February 1, Igor Dyatlov made the most critical and perhaps the most fatal decision of his life. Instead of setting up camp in the safe shelter of the forest, they chose to climb above the tree line, onto the exposed, wind-swept slope, onto the flank of Kholat Syakhl. In the Mansi language, its name means the Mountain of Death.
The hours were passing. The final sunset had come. 9 lives, and before them, an endless darkness awaited. Let's go back just 2 weeks before that darkness. The date, January 23rd, 1959. Death Mountain did not exist yet. No torn tents, unexplained injuries, or traces of radiation. Only youth, excitement, and the pride of completing one of the Soviet Union's most challenging certification routes. Igor Dyatlov, 23 years old. His friends called him Gosha. Disciplined, experienced, and a charismatic leader. The team with him were not ordinary university students. They were the Ural Polytechnic Institute's most elite mountaineers. Fear was not something they carried in their packs. Their route stretched deep into the northern Urals. The target, Mount Otorten. A meaningful name in the Mansi language, don't go there. But to them, it was just a name. As the train moved farther from civilization, laughter gradually gave way to the gravity of the adventure approaching.
Just before the mysterious event that would follow, on January 25, they arrived in Vizhai. This was the last bastion of civilization, the northernmost settlement. Beyond this point lay nothing but endless snow, ice, and silence. Here, they made their final contacts with the locals, the loggers, and the Mansi people of the region. Everything was in order. Equipment checked, final letters written, telegrams sent to their families. We may not return until February 12, they said. Little did they know, those telegrams would be the last news their families ever received from them. Yet fate had a different plan for one of them, even before they reached the mountain. Perhaps the most pivotal, chilling moment of destiny in this story happened here. Yuri Yudin, the 10th member of the team. Early in the journey, while traveling from Vizhai to the second northern settlement, his chronic leg pain flared up, sciatica. It was so severe he couldn't walk. With a 30-kilogram pack on his back, it was impossible for him to cross those mountains. Date, January 28, the decisive moment for Yudin. He had to turn back. Look closely at this shot of him saying goodbye to his friends, especially Luda Dubinina. Can you see the sorrow on Yudin's face? At that moment, he thought he was experiencing the greatest disappointment of his life. He was devastated to leave his friends behind. But there was something he didn't know. His sciatic pain was a gift from the gods. As Yuri Yudin boarded the truck and returned home, he didn't realize he was actually escaping his own funeral. Yudin watched his friends disappear into the mist. A shiver ran through him. He gave them his wool sweater and a few items to keep them warm. "You'll need this," he said. And that was the last moment the 9 friends would be seen alive. They were no longer 10, they were 9, and they were alone.
Civilization was left behind. Now it was just them and nature. Looking at their diaries, we can see their spirits were still high. Zana Kolmogorova wrote, "The weather is great today. The snow is deep, but the skis glide well. Igor has set the route." They were singing and looked happy. They followed the Lozva River, then turned toward the Ospia River. This area was the hunting ground of the Mansi people. They began to notice Mansi markings on the trees.
known as Tomga. These symbols indicated tribal territories and hunting paths. Some conspiracy theorists claim these signs were a warning that the group had entered a cursed area. But for Dyatlov and his team, they were merely geographic markers. They relied not on superstition, but on their compasses and modern equipment. Yet nature had already begun leaving its own marks for them.
When the calendar reached January 31st, they arrived at the end of the Auspia River Valley. There, at the foot of the mountain, they created a storage cache where they left extra food and equipment to retrieve on their return. This was the strongest evidence that they fully intended to come back. And then, they turned their faces upward, beyond the tree line. This is the point where one must stop and think. Did they make a critical mistake here, or did the weather conditions force them into it? When they decided to begin the ascent, it was February 1st. They started climbing in the afternoon. Their goal was to cross the ridge and reach the other side. However, in the northern Urals, the weather could change as fast and as sharply as a bullet. Visibility dropped. The wind grew stronger, almost as if it wanted to keep them on that slope. They seemed to have lost their sense of direction slightly, and suddenly, they found themselves on the barren slope of that chilling peak, Kholat Syakhl, the mountain of death. They could have descended back to the forest, to the sheltered area among the trees. It was only 1.5 kilometers below. Down there was no wind. There was firewood. But Igor Dyatlov did not want to lose altitude. Or perhaps he wanted to test his team's ability to set up camp under harsh conditions. For now, all of these remain unknowns. A cold camp on a sloped mountainside. This is one of the toughest challenges in mountaineering. Around 5 p.m., the sun was about to set. Looking at the weather conditions of that day, it is highly likely that the temperature had dropped to -25 or even -30 degrees. They began setting up their tent on that cursed spot. They dug out the snow to level the ground. They used their skis as support poles. 9 people squeezed into that narrow canvas tent. They took off their wet clothes. They had no blankets. They would warm themselves with each other's body heat. Some cocoa, a few crackers. They were tired but not worried. The final line in the diary said, "For now, we are in the tent. Setting up the stove is difficult but not impossible." At that moment, while they were joking inside the tent, did they sense something changing outside in the darkness? Was there a different tone in the wind's voice? Or was the terror that would wake them from their sleep and drive them out of that tent at -30 degrees, wearing only socks or even barefoot, approaching them silently? Think about it. 9 highly experienced mountaineers. Outside, deadly cold. Inside, safety. What could force you to cut your own tent from the inside with a knife and run into the darkness without even putting on your shoes? An avalanche? An animal? A military experiment? Or some other force that pushes the limits of reason? What kind of power could make human beings react so quickly?
On the date of February 1, 1959, the time was 3 p.m. 9 experienced mountaineers left behind the sheltered forested area of the Auspia River Valley. Behind them, they had built a supply cache where they left provisions for the return journey. Their backpacks were a little lighter, but the weight on their shoulders was destiny itself. When we examine their route, we see a strange deviation. The group intended to cross the pass to reach Mount Otorten. However, the weather was turning bad. Visibility had dropped to nearly zero. The wind had intensified and was growing stronger by the minute. The snow was striking their faces like a slap. Under these conditions, the experienced leader, Igor Dyatlov, had to make a decision. And that decision would perhaps become the greatest if only of this entire story. They unintentionally veered west and found themselves on the middle of a bare, unprotected slope. This was Holachal. There has been much speculation about the meaning of this name in the local Mansi language. Most sources translate it as Mountain of Death. Some linguists, however, claim it simply means a barren mountain where nothing grows. But that night, this mountain would earn the darkest meaning of its name.
When the time was 1700, the sun was about to set. The group stopped roughly 300 meters below the summit. Let's pause and think here. Why this spot? What did this place signify?
Just 1.5 kilometers below, there was the safe forest line where the wind could not reach them and where firewood was plentiful. Skiing down there would have taken them at most 15 to 20 minutes. So why did Dyatlov choose to stay on that cold, windy, and dangerous slope? This question has been asked for 60 years. 60 years of repeatedly haunting the minds of researchers. According to one theory, they did not want to lose the altitude they had gained. They wanted to reach Otorten more quickly the next day. Another view suggests that Dyatlov wanted to train the group in cold camping. In other words, spending the night in open terrain without lighting a stove, relying only on the protection of the tent. Could that be the case? Was this a training exercise or a challenge? We will never truly know. The only thing we do know is that they dug into the slope to set up the tent, and that this action may have destabilized the snowpack. The tent was set up, a long tunnel measuring 4 meters by 2 meters, created by joining 2 canvas sheets. Outside, the temperature was minus 25, maybe minus 30 degrees. With the wind chill, it was cold enough to freeze a person within minutes. But inside, it was still human. The final legacy they left us. The diaries found at the scene show that the group's morale remained high until the very last moment. But they were not afraid. They were even joking around. That night, inside the tent, they prepared a handmade satirical newspaper they called Evening Otorten, or Večerní Otorten. One headline read, "Scientists debate the existence of the Yeti. According to recent evidence, Yetis live in the northern Urals near Mount Otorten." This was an inside joke among the group. Perhaps they were trying to ward off the approaching danger with a touch of humor buried in their subconscious. Who knows? Maybe that Yeti joke was an ironic foreshadowing of the horror that was about to unfold. The autopsy reports, based on the undigested food found in their stomachs, show that they had not yet eaten their last meal, or were just about to. A piece of pork bacon was found in the tent, cut, but not eaten. Time seemed frozen. Their shoes had been taken off. Wet clothes were hung up to dry. 9 young people, engineers, students, bright minds with dreams. Under that piece of fabric they believed to be the safest place in the world, they were lying on top of their sleeping bags.
2100, 2200. The storm outside is growing stronger. Snow is beginning to pile up on the tent. Could the tons of snow mass on the slope right above their heads be on the verge of losing its battle against gravity? Or
was there something else watching them? A secret test conducted by the Soviet military? Or those orange orbs that other hikers in the area reported seeing in the sky that night. Something went wrong. Terribly wrong. It was such a moment of panic that logic, training, and even the instinct to survive all vanished in an instant. They did not even have time to open the tent door.
They cut the tent from the inside. Each knife slash seemed to tear not just the fabric, but their fate itself. They leapt out into the freezing cold, into minus 30 degrees, without their jackets and without their boots.
What could possibly force you out of your warm sleeping bag, push you outside into deadly cold without even putting on your shoes? While fleeing from the thing behind them, why did they choose the certainty of death that lay ahead? At the sight of the tent, time stopped that night. But down below, beneath the cedar tree, the second act of the tragedy was about to begin. They thought they were escaping the mountain, but the mountain had already swallowed them.
May 28, 1959. As was common in the former Soviet Union, the Sverdlovsk Regional Prosecutor's Office officially closed the investigation. Without a case number, without identifying a definitive culprit, and leaving behind far more questions than answers, Chief Investigator Lev Ivanov placed his famous, puzzling, and perhaps the most unsatisfying signature in history at the bottom of the report.
Cause of death: an unknown compelling natural force.
For Soviet bureaucracy, this phrase was perfect. It was neither a confession of murder nor an admission of state fault. It was simply nature's untamed face, one that humans cannot control. The region was closed to hikers and civilians for 3 years. Families were told, "Your children died of freezing," and open caskets were not permitted at the funerals. The incident was quietly covered up, like snow settling over the Ural Mountains.
But even if the files were shelved, memory could not be erased. The Soviet Union collapsed, the Iron Curtain fell, the world changed. Yet the question of why those 9 young people tore the tent open from the inside and ran toward death that night has haunted us like a ghost ever since.
For decades, theories swirled in the air. A KGB assassination, escaped convicts, radiation tests, UFOs, even a Mansi curse. Everyone projected their own fears into this void. Until the year 2019.
On the 60th anniversary of the incident, the Russian Prosecutor General's office reopened the case in response to growing public pressure and the relentless flood of conspiracy theories. Their aim was not to prove the existence of Yetis, aliens, or KGB assassins, but to let science speak. And in 2020, modern science provided what is perhaps the most plausible, yet maybe the least satisfying answer: the slab avalanche. Researchers created a simulation using the snow animation technology originally developed for Disney's film Frozen. The scenario was as follows. When they cut into the slope to set up their tent, they destabilized the snow. Later that night, with the added force of the wind, a hardened block of snow above them broke loose. It did not fall with a thunderous roar, but with a deadly silence as it collapsed onto the tent. Tons of weight. What crushed the rib cages of Dubinina and Zolotaryov was not a blow, but this immense pressure. Is it scientifically consistent? Yes. The slab avalanche explains why they abandoned the tent, why they ran downhill in panic, and why they succumbed to hypothermia. But here, at the end of this documentary,
I must ask you something as a screenwriter and a researcher. Can science explain the terror within the human soul? An avalanche theory cannot explain why Luda's tongue was missing. It is easy to say wild animals ate it, but why would those animals take the eyes and tongue, yet leave the rest of the body untouched? The avalanche theory cannot explain the radiation found on the clothing, and most importantly, it cannot fully explain why those highly experienced hikers, after leaving the tent, did not stay by the fire, why they walked deeper into the dark forest, directly toward death.
Perhaps we are making a mistake. Perhaps in trying to solve the Dyatlov case, we are constantly looking for a killer. Was the killer a soldier, an alien, or a block of snow? Yet nature is not a killer. Nature is simply indifferent. Igor Dyatlov and his friends, fueled by the boundless courage of youth, went to one of the most merciless places on Earth. And that night, the mountain simply moved. We must stop remembering them as victims, as a case, or as bodies. They were 9 young people who loved, studied engineering, wrote poetry, and had bright futures ahead of them. In their final hours, whether it was an avalanche or a missile test, they did not abandon each other. They carried their injured friends. They removed their own clothes to warm those who were freezing. In that infernal cold, they preserved their humanity until their last breath. Is the case closed? Officially, yes. But the truth is this: on that desolate slope of the Ural Mountains, the wind still whispers the story of those 9 names. And no matter how many theories we come up with, in the warmth of our homes, in front of our screens, only they know the truth, and they will remain forever a part of that mountain.